I just think that the Creator put a little bit of truth into every people group, and maybe it was a way for us to listen to each other and to get a fuller picture of the Creator. If we just see Him through our own cultural lens, we just got a tiny picture of Him.
Welcome to the Urbana podcast. This is the show where we empower Christian leaders on college campuses with the tools and strategies to help students address the challenges facing our world and advance the gospel's reach to the ends of the earth. Well, we are back here again, Phoebe. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you today?
I am loving life. It's been really rainy and it's sunny out today. And so I'm enjoying perfectly sunshine weather, and got some new landscaping done at my house.
Oh, lovely.
So the outside looks nice. So I'm loving that. So
Wheaton is finally like 75 today after months and months of cold and rain. So I am very happy. It seems like everyone on campus is just smiling. It's really sweet.
Well, I don't want to keep you indoors too long, Phoebe. I want to get you back out there enjoying that awesome weather with your friends. So we'll kind of move this along. I'm excited about our guest today. It's Corey Greaves. He is with the Yakama Nation in Washington. And a lot of times on this podcast, we talk to people who are going, who are sending, who are all about missionaries, going into other cultures and sharing the good news. But rarely do we ever take time to listen to those who are receiving missionaries. And Corey represents one nation among many native peoples that have received some of the worst of the missionary efforts and have suffered at their hand. And yet Corey continues to invite and welcome people to come in, but he does so in a way that is trying to help them come in a good way, because that's a really important part of going, is that we also come in a good way to the people that receive us. So I'm excited to hear what Corey has to share with us today.
I would love to hear from you, Mark. How did you initially meet Corey?
You know, that's an interesting story, actually, because I was invited, almost 20 years ago to facilitate a gathering of theologians, missiologists, agencies that were sending people on short-term mission trips to actually critique short-term missions and figure out how we could do them better. And that actually led to some groups of people forming something called the Standards of Excellence for Short-Term Missions. But it was in that time that I met Corey. And, you know, one of the things about missions is it's probably one of the most critiqued and self-examined, endeavors, because ultimately we want what we do to be good news. But sometimes we allow our cultural baggage to kind of infuse with the gospel and get in the way. And so Corey was one of the people there that was really speaking boldly about being, receiving missions and the experience of that. And it really opened my eyes. And you're going to hear Corey talk about decolonization. That can mean a lot of different things to people. But I think what Corey's really trying to get at here is that when they received the gospel as First Nations people, it came with a lot of cultural baggage, and they've had to work to separate the cultural components with the actual way of Jesus, or the way of Yeshua, as Corey would talk about that. So you probably won't agree with everything Corey says. He doesn't agree with everything I say, but that's okay. It's good to talk with each other and to really understand what we're trying to do, because we want this to be effective work. So I'm excited to introduce to you Corey Greaves. Welcome, Corey Greaves, to the Urbana podcast.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Honored to be here.
Hey, Corey, how long have we known each other? It's got to be at least 15, 20 years?
Maybe, yeah. I know it's been a minute. I'm really bad at time frames. I really am. But like I said, known you long enough to know that I trust you.
Oh, well, and likewise, too. Thank you for that. That's kind of you. I think this is the first time I've seen your office. I mean, for as long as we've known each other, we've always seen each other in other spaces, never really in our home spaces. So I see you got a Spider-Man behind you, and you're sporting a Spider-Man tee, which obviously warms my heart as a comic book fan.
Yeah, we could geek out here for sure, man. Even though Spider-Man's not my favorite, Wolverine by far is my favorite, but I have a kind of a fear of spiders, a little arachnophobia going on, and so people think it's cute to buy me Spider-Man stuff. So that's why I got a lot of Spider-Man stuff.
Okay, so this is something that people do to you.
Yeah, mostly, except for the big statue in the back. That one, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, the reason, Corey, that I invited you to be on the podcast today is, the way that I first met you was through Mending Wings, the youth ministry that you ran and still run. And maybe you could just tell everybody a little bit about that background and where you're from and your people as well.
Yeah, sure. And feel free to cut me off if because I tend to meander while I talk. Our kids say I'm becoming a good elder. So just let me know if I'm going too long. But Mending Wings, yeah. We're a nonprofit Native youth organization. We work with our predominantly 6th through 12th grade students, do a lot of cultural revitalization and retention. And what does it look like, sound like, smell like, feel like to be a follower of the Jesus way as Native people? So it's always a journey. It's part of my journey. Still haven't arrived. A lot of Mending Wings is kind of doing a lot of decolonizing of the gospel among our people, and so and it really was birthed out of this out of a need, I guess, that I saw where. I was working mostly under non-native leadership, and they weren't bad people, good people and stuff, but they just didn't have a clue how to work with our folks, our kids. And so for me, it kind of culminated. I was working with the PCUSA at the time, and we used to have these every 3 years was a Native Youth Conference. And so this one particular one I went to and brought our kids, a bunch of our students to and all that, and was really involved in some of the shaping of it, although I was very limited in my voice. Kind of by the end of the week, after everybody had gone home, I realized the only thing that really made that a Native Youth Conference was that there was Native youth there. But it kind of was like another kind of Euro-American youth conference. And so for me, because I had been dealing with that for so many years, it was just kind of the proverbial icing on the cake, straw that broke the camel's. I was done. I think I was just done with, I almost felt done with the church, honestly, at that point, like where Western church, like I'm done. So I remember going into the only air-conditioned building that I remember on the camp. It was at Manal School down in Albuquerque, and it was a little a library. It was pretty tiny. It was like 5 bookshelves and a couple computers and a couch. And I remember the couch because I laid down because I was tired, but my mind was going. And I got up and began to pace. And I'm not one of those people that say, "Hey, God told me." Because I think we throw that around a little too flippantly to justify things that we want to do. But I did get a clearer vision that day than anything I've had before that time or since, and it came in this prose. And it was, my people were here long before the others cast their sails to the wind, before the tears of innocence like a heartbreak would descend, and my people spread like eagle's wings across the mountains and the plains. Now our feathers have been broken, but the eagle still remains. And so, Corey, that's what you're to be about, is mending the wings of your people, your youth, so they can fly again. So I remember calling up my wife and saying, I had this vision, and my wife's very grounded, very practical person. She's like, "Oh, your head's in the clouds, again." And I'm like, yeah, probably. But I came back to Yakama. I went to Print Guys and got me a business card that made me president Mending Wings, whatever that meant. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but probably put the cart before the horse. But so anyway, so yeah, from that time to now is, we've grown to be one of the largest Native youth ministries in the country. And it really is not tooting our own horn, because I would get tuts if I did that. But it's really just to say that we've been able to speak into the lives of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Native students down through the years, and help show them the way to Yeshua within an Indigenous context we follow, and really recapturing, as my mentor used to say, rescuing theology back from the cowboys, and trying to decolonize our faith. And so that's really kind of what Mending Wings is all about. So we have, 13, 15 paid and volunteer staff, and run programs almost every night of the week, and just doing a lot of things for our kids. Yeah. Here in the Yakama Nation.
So, the Yakama Nation.
Yeah. I kind of feel like I feel like I should have introduced myself kind of in this good way, and I didn't. I'm biased. But if this was back home, we were gathered, I would introduce myself. Shech Maetsky, Inkanashwanek Shakwash Kwash Kushiapotimki, Corey Greaves, and the Shaiksha Stopnish Ba Washnash Yakama Klikatakinik, Ku Irish Kinik, Ku Blackfeet Kinik, Naithla Iwa, Shirley Looker Ku Atwai, Kasamwai, Lavina Wilkins, Ku Natutas Iwa, Philip Greaves Ku Atwai, Tom Black Eagle, Kut Ncha Shinichai Waptas. So just basically what I said was good morning. I told you my Indian name. I told you my English name. Told you where I'm from, who my people are, who my parents are, and where I work. And so all of that kind of uniquely positions us within our community. Oh, these are your parents. These are your grandparents. Oh, I know who you are. I know your family, And so that's kind of how we introduce ourselves. I know in Western culture, it's a little bit different, right? What's your name and what do you do? But what I do doesn't define who I am. It's just a job that I have, to make money, But my family, my people, the land I live on and come from, that defines who I am.
One of the first things that you and I did together was we were evaluating the efficacy of short-term missions trips. And we had kind of a symposium where we were talking about just best practices and things like that. And I was so drawn to your perspective, because when we think about missions, and Urbana is all about being a missions conference and going to other cultures to share the gospel, your people have been the ones that have received some of these missionaries and some of these good intentions. And it hasn't always been good news that has been shared.
No, sir.
And the way that it's been shared has been really bad. Talk a little bit about that, and we can talk a little bit beyond that too about just the short-term trips that you redesigned around that. But maybe just share with us a little bit about what it's like to be Native peoples who the good news has not always been good for.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I need to also just make a little disclaimer here, because I know sometimes people get confused. I am one man. I am not a tribal chairman. I'm not a chief. I don't speak for my tribe. I don't speak for all Indian people. I'm just a common human being.
That's good.
Who's following this path of beauty that we call the Jesus way. So I think it's important to kind of say that at the beginning.
Yeah. You're speaking for Corey Greaves.
You're going to hear my journey this morning. Yeah, we had been, I guess, what was it, in 1492, right? We all know that little poem, and usually when I'm speaking someplace and I just say in 1492 and I leave that there for a second, everybody starts saying Columbus sailed the ocean blue, just to show how brainwashed we are. But I say in 1492, as I learned from my mentor, when we discovered old Chris out there floating around and lost in the Caribbean, and took him in, helped him back to health and all that. They say that in what's now the United States, there were about 20 million people, 150 million over here on this continent. 400 years later, there were about 230,000 of us left. So from 20 million to 200,000, that's one of the greatest examples of cultural genocide or ethnic cleansing in the history of the world. And all that took place right here in the good old US of A. And it began with the government, but after the boarding schools were developed, the government handed us out like playing cards to the different church denominations to civilize us. And so then the church got involved into that. And so oftentimes under the blessing and the direction of the church. And so, and just in my own story, learning to become when I became a follower of Yeshua, it was such a simple thing. I just loved this Yeshua. I loved this creator and I wanted to follow him. But then after I became a follower of the Jesus way and I began to learn what all that meant, I found out now that I had to become a Christian. And I found out that those were two kind of different realities. Because now I had to decide, was I going to be a Wesleyan or a Presbyterian or a Methodist or, because they all had the right way. They all had sound theology and they all had orthodoxy. So, so then I had to decide what version of the Bible what was the right version to read, and I grew up in a fundamentalist academy and it was the King James, man. There was no other, right? Even though that was a translation of a translation. Was it going to be the Revised American Standard or the NIV? That's finally the one I settled on, was the NIV, the New Indian Version, and then things became less complicated for me after that. So all of that part of my journey, the gospel was really never good news because our Indian stuff couldn't be part of Christianity because that's not scriptural. That's not in the Bible. I even had missions committees at various churches around the country that I met with. Why? Don't worry about being Indian. Don't worry about all that Indian stuff. We just want to be a follower of Jesus culture. And my thought was, but we don't. None of us understand, worship the Creator apart from culture. None of us do. We don't live in some cultural vacuum. And then, even I've had them say, just be part of a biblical culture. So what I thought was, is that Scythian? Is that Hebrew? Is that Aramaic? What culture are we talking about? Because even in the culture, or in the Bible, there's multiple cultures. So basically, we were, as Native folks, I think we've just been told, hey, man, Creator, he loves you so much that he sent his son Yeshua to die on this tree for you, but he doesn't like you a lot. You don't like your native drums and your dances and your, certainly not your theologies. So if you want to become a follower of the Jesus way, just forget all that stuff. Trade in your sin-stained culture to embrace our sin-stained culture. As if to say one expression of, humanity's worship to this infinite, invisible creator is somehow better than others. So that's kind of been our story in the church. It's just another one of those things that kind of motivated me to start Mending Wings. So that's the journey, is decolonizing Christianity in my life. And again, it's a journey. I've not arrived. I haven't got it all figured out yet. I'm still having to deconstruct a lot of, really, for me, it's fundamentalism. So you want to talk about extreme Christianity, right? So I'm having to deconstruct a lot of that in my life. I find that it's still there. When I think it's gone, all of a sudden it rears its ugly head, So I guess you could say I'm kind of
we see a lot of that. We see a lot of that happening today with young people, where outside in the majority culture, where they're deconstructing their faith, and a lot of that is them trying to make sense of Yeshua apart from their cultural expression of that. So you're using the term decolonization. In a sense, we all need to decolonize our faith to a certain extent, because our sin-stained cultural expression of Christianity is keeping us from experiencing, the fullness, perhaps. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Oh, sure, man. And then even it's not just, it's not just about cultural forms and means. I mean, even our theology, right? So, why? So as my mentor, we used to talk about this kind of stuff too. And, why do we have to follow a bunch of old dead white guys and their theologies if that's orthodoxy across all time and all cultures? Why do I have to quote them? So he was doing a doctorate at the time, and he's, why can't I quote myself? So yeah.
Because we're all theologians. We're all theologizing all the time,
aren't we? Though, and we got 3.5 pounds of brain to try to figure it all out. So good luck with that. So I think maybe instead of arguing with each other and thinking that we all have the right idea, that maybe just if we could just listen to each other a little bit more, and because I just think that the Creator put a little bit of truth into every people group, and maybe it was a way for us to listen to each other and to get a fuller picture of the Creator. If we just see Him through our own cultural lens, we just got a tiny picture of Him, and it just shows that we need each other. So we as the host people of this land, we're a people of this land. We have something to offer to the church, right? Because we have a theology of place and a theology of belonging that no other people group on this continent can have. It's just the way it is, man. Your people have been here, other peoples, not just those who are the descendants of the tribes of Europe, but also those who are the descendants of the tribes of Africa and the descendants of the tribes of Asia. All those people, or India, or wherever they're from, they're not from this area, the place that the Creator put us. And so, all your roots, they don't go very deep, yet. And when the winds blow, man, it could uproot you, and so that way, I think in that way, you have a lot to learn from us, if we could stop being the perpetual mission field. So we were watching that on our res over and over, every summer, all these groups descending upon the Yakama Nation to help us poor Indians, And it really was a top-down, right, kind of approach where these church groups, these youth groups, they would come to the reservation and they'd hold vacation Bible schools and kids clubs. And at one point there was a missions organization on our res. We've since, kind of helped them leave. But they were inviting people in to come work with the Yakama people, but they never asked if they could be here. And so it wasn't a helpful model at all. I'm not going to drop any names, just to save face. But so for me watching this, and again, my mentor, he was Lakota, and he would talk about on his little tiny res up in South Dakota, 500 people a week would descend upon this little town of like 500 people on the reservation, and they'd do all these things, the same thing that they're doing on our res, and they'd paint houses and get kids, quote unquote, saved, and then they'd go home, and then the next week, the next 500 would arrive, and they'd get, paint more houses and get the same kids saved all over again, and and for 8 weeks during the summer, this happened, and this happens here too on our reservation. So that by the end of the summer, after all the groups have put together their PowerPoints and their slideshows, and they went home and had their church, youth worship Sunday service, and said, "Look what we did." And I just thought to myself, Well, you're talking about bringing compassion, but that's a me-centered compassion. It's about you. You're feeling really good about yourself, but meanwhile, back here, nothing really it happened, changed, except a couple of new paint jobs. I mean, if coming forward and saying the little mantra, the little come into my heart, if that's getting saved, then every person on our reservation is saved, 100 times over, because they got a lollipop for it too. So that kind of methodology, that kind of mission trip, that's the stuff that sickens me. And because we sit and watch it happen.
And so you did something about it.
Let me tell you about it, if I could.
Yeah. Because you this is where you and I really connected, was on how you were saying, hey, God is already at work here.
Right. Yeah.
Let's reform and reimagine how we're doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important to remember that Creator didn't come over to this country on the Mayflower. Right? If we believe in an omnipresent Creator, He was already here. He was already working among our people. So, missionaries don't need to bring God to us. He's already here. So really kind of how things began for our organization in addressing this issue and trying to change some of the paradigm of these short-term mission trips was, again, there was a youth organization that was here, youth missions organization on our reservation, and they were holding a vacation Bible school type thing. And I remember I was standing kind of in the back, just watching and observing. They were at this park, and I remember a couple of our little Indian girls came up. They were probably, 5, 6 years old. And they were hair was messy, dirty. It looked like they were having a good time, like playing around in the mud and whatever. And they just happened to come. I remember a couple of the kids from these youth groups that had come had run up and picked up one of those little girls and said, "Oh, you poor little thing," and started dusting her off. "I wish I could just take you home with me." And me and the others that were kind of in the back kind of looked at each other, and what that did was that screamed to us loud and clear that they thought what they had to offer our kids was better than what we had to offer them. And I think there's a word for this. I call it Eurocentrism. And yeah, so for me, I said, enough's enough, man. So they're coming. They're not stopping. They're going to keep coming here. Every summer, they're going to keep coming. So I could sit here and whine around and complain about it and get all upset, or I can do something about it. So I sat down with a couple of my kids at the time, two of my daughters, and we just started talking about this, and they were in agreement. They were young teenagers. Even at that age, they were in agreement. They're like, yeah. So we came up with this name. I'm not really good at coming up with names, but I came up with SLAM trips. And SLAM is an acronym, Students Learning About Missions. And I thought, is that not the ethos? We don't, they don't need to come and teach us anymore. We know about Yeshua. We've done it. We've heard it and seen it 1,000 times over. And it's not, and the way they're doing it isn't helping. It's not working. I mean, to me, isn't that the definition of insanity, when you do the same thing over and over again, but expect different results each time, right? That's short-term Western mission trips. So I was tired of the insanity. And so students learning about mission, I said, isn't that what we want to be? We want them to come as learners. So instead of them thinking that they only have something of value to offer to us, but we in turn have nothing of value to offer to them, let's instead say, no, I think we have something to offer you as the indigenous people of this land, that the church is just limping along without the contributions of indigenous people. Because you don't have a theology of place here, a theology of belonging. So we can help you with that. And what can Native people teach the church about community? Wow, is that lacking? And get rid of this individualism in the church. Musically, I'm not a big fan of hymns, But theologically, I'm a bigger fan of hymns than I am of this modern contemporary worship stuff, which is all about me, I. It's personal pronouns saturated throughout those songs. You read some of the old songs, and it's about us. It's about we. So
more of a horizontal connection.
How about more of a cyclical connection? That's how we look at the world, is more like a circle, right? Everything's connected.
Oh, interesting.
So, so we started slam trips, we call them, where we invite groups in to come. Boy, there's a change. They don't come into our reservation with this horrible theology, this interpretation of Yeshua. And he said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And so therefore, here we are, whether you want us here or not. That's the stuff that hasn't worked. You have to earn a place among us to be heard before you ever earn a place to speak. But the people that come, they don't know that. So let us invite people to come and funnel them through this program where we can be on this journey together of deconstructing, because really what that Western short-term mission model, trips model is colonization. It's the colonization of the gospel. It really is. Especially where the gospel and culture have become so sacrosanct, where it's hard for people even to differentiate between what's culture and what's from the Creator, like what's different. So we invite groups in. They come. We do spring breaks. We do summer breaks. And so we run 8 weeks in the summer, a couple weeks in the spring, and college groups and family groups and lots of youth groups. And they come to our reservation in a good way. They come as invitees. They come in the spirit of learning. That, man, we have a lot to learn from you. So we don't allow them to teach vacation Bible schools or kids clubs or any of that. But we talk about our history together as the church and Native people. And it's really about breaking down walls and building bridges. So where we can look and say, here's our footprints that we left together in the past. And let's look and say, let's never walk that way again. Let's leave a new set of footprints where your kids and our kids once were two separate rivers, but now they've come together, right? And there's one Creator above all of us.
Well, Corey, this has been incredible. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, and we have at times.
Yeah.
And I wanted to introduce people to you because, as we're pursuing, this idea of the Great Commission, we acknowledge that people have used theology badly to do bad things. They've sometimes used it as a motivation to do the wrong thing. Sometimes they've used it as a cover to do things that were evil in their heart. And we hope that as we continue to learn and reflect as people in the Jesus way, that we learn more how to not just go, but come in a good way. And it's these dialogues that are, I think, so important, to this conversation. And I'm thrilled that you would engage Urbana this way. Obviously, you probably don't agree with everything that we will do there, and we probably don't agree with everything that you would do there, but we're part of a community of Jesus followers, and so we're informing one another. We're in this circle together of trying to follow in the way of Jesus, and I appreciate you for just being willing to engage us in this conversation.
And Mark, I am always encouraged when I meet folks like yourself that, hey, there's good people out there. There's good people that there's good followers of the Jesus way that aren't interested in kind of putting us down or making us feel bad about ourselves or whatever, but that we're willing to engage in conversation and say, you may have something and a understanding and a angle of the Creator that we don't have, and we can learn from each other. And so that's why I really value our friendship. I appreciate you, Mark, and several others that I've met down through the years.
As I and our leadership team put Urbana together, and we're going to encourage, a generation to go and help others follow in the way of Jesus. Would you say a prayer over us just for wisdom, and that Creator would help us to move it forward? I'm sure we'll solve problems from the past together, and we'll make new problems for future generations to solve. But hopefully we'll get closer to what Jesus originally envisioned his way being. But we'll only do it if we're doing it together. So would you say a word of prayer over us for that?
Absolutely. Can I throw a quick website blurb?
Sure, of course.
Can I do that? If anybody's interested in
Yes.
A slam trip for their youth group or their church group or whatever, it's slamtrips.com. Or you can also go to mendingwings.net. You'll have a link to it. Is there? All right.
Yeah, we'll put that in.
So, Tlachwit, Tinma, ku Pashtima, ku Hispanic ma, Asian ma, Indian ma, Shakwasha, Kuptamaksha, Tamamwatlaimi, Tamanwit. Ich Iwa Ticham, Akishwit, Chush, Ku Pini Twachani. Wina Pima Kwaslanucha, Tamamwatlaimi, Yao. Tamamwatla, Nuknuich, Imami Wakishwit. And so, Creator, we thank you for all the people that are gathered and will be gathered at Urbana. We thank you for the sacred foods, the land, our mother that you've put us here on to walk together as under one sky and one Creator, and to be responsible towards one another. I ask that you would bless each of these lives in the name of Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.
Right.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah,
it's good to spend time with you always.
For sure, man.
Well, I'm glad you got to hear from Corey today, and it's just great to have a friend like that who you don't always agree with things. He's working on things, I'm working on things, but we get together, and it's like that proverb, iron sharpens iron. We make each other better through our conversations. And so I was really grateful that he came on and did that. Phoebe, I'm just curious, what are some insights from my conversation with Corey today?
Yeah, I really loved what he had to say about the short-term mission trips that he runs through Mending Wings. Just how he's bringing students alongside Native people to learn what God is already doing there. So it's kind of reframing this model that traditional Western missionaries have had around, we bring the resources, we bring the gospel to these places. We're saving people from whatever they've had in their past lives and bringing them into new life. And he was talking about how in the past, missionaries had come in with that perspective, and they had actually just saved these Native children over and over and over again.
Week after week after week.
Right, exactly. And that was not ultimately helpful in any way, shape, or form. And so I just really admired his approach of seeing this broken system of missions that was happening in his own community, in his own home, with his family almost, in just the community around him. Yeah, and so I just loved his model of partnership and learning about what God is doing in this community, coming alongside to walk with these people and hear their stories, instead of just coming in with this posture of, I have all the answers. So yeah, I really loved that.
Even in just our personal everyday lives, to be mindful of the fact that while we are bringing good news, God is already at work in those people's lives often, even our friends and people that we meet just doing life together, that hearing their spiritual backstories and hearing maybe what is happening is really important. And at Urbana, I know we don't just want to be about going and sending. We want to be about coming in a good way. And I want to encourage everybody who's listening, by the way. Corey was a part of a project led by Terry Wildman with InterVarsity Press to do a First Nations translation. And what's really cool about this translation, for those of us that aren't First Nations people, is that it is in English, but it's written from a First Nations perspective and worldview. So you're reading the scripture, but it's being read contextually in the mindset and the framework of First Nations people. And it really just helps you capture some of the essence of the gospel from a different perspective. And so I really encourage people to go out and check that out. Have you seen it, Phoebe?
Yeah, that's really well said. I actually was first introduced to the First Nations version at the last Urbana when I attended as a freshman. And so coming in and having no idea initially that we were going to explore the Bible from a First Nations perspective, but we did have a specific session where we got to read from that translation. They translate Jesus as creator sets free, which is really interesting. So that's like a sample of how they actually go into the Hebrew or the Greek meanings of each name in the New Testament, and they translate them into kind of First Nations type names, which is really beautiful. So as you're reading, you just get so much richer symbolism and depth to this imagery, which I really loved to hear at the last Urbana. So I thought it was really special, very honoring to First Nations people.
Yeah, if you haven't had a chance to read it, like I said, it's a rare thing because a lot of translations are actually translated in a language you don't understand either. So there's no way you can access them unless you know that language. But in this context, it's written in English, but from the worldview of First Nations people. So really a unique opportunity, a gift to those of us that aren't First Nations people to kind of get into an understanding of their context. And it's a beautiful, beautiful translation. So something to encourage everybody to take a look at. And at Urbana, we're going to talk about coming in a good way. And we're going to talk about making sure that we're doing things the way that we should as we go in there. I mean, we're always going to make some mistakes in the work that we do. I'm sure of that. But hopefully, we fix another generation's mistakes while maybe making our own, maybe making less of them along the way. But it was really good to hear from Corey and just kind of get a different spin on everything that is happening. So want to encourage everybody to come and get exposure to what God is doing from peoples all over the globe. And that can happen in your life at urbana.org. We will see you there in December. But before that, hopefully you'll see Phoebe and I on another Urbana podcast.